Yeah. Thanks very much for coming and being here. Maybe just to say a word about what that kind of dialogue or format might be meant to be. So actually, Najman and I have been starting to talk, to exchange, to discuss, etc., on contemporary dance and art in Arab cultures and different countries a while ago. So what we're going to do today is just like going on. That's important because it's more like it's really an ongoing kind of research and trying to understand what's happening on the spot, and it's not about homogenizing all these different countries and conditions and, well, you know, political context and of course artistic work. So this is for us, I guess, very important that you take it that way. That's more like getting on some traces and sharing with you some observation and not like kind of affirming things too much. So, as I said, there's a very myriad texture in the different Arabic countries, and of course you cannot like easily compare all of them and their artistic creation. But maybe what one might say, I would say, is that there is a kind of joint commitment by the artists to give imaginary but also physical space to dance and to make it visible in very different ways. So, because Pieko said it's about an agonal dialogue, and maybe to just make clear what this could mean, it's really about understanding this conversation not so much as trying to get to some consensus or fixing things, but exactly working on the brittle character, you know, the composed character, the work in progress character that is also very important, I guess, for the artists working in the region. So, what we thought is that when you look at the way that dance is referred to, or artistic creation in contemporary dance is referred to in the region, there is, in Western Europe at least, or in Western society, at least two main surfaces or two main textures that this artistic creation is always discussed upon. And one is, of course, unstructured, voluntarily or involuntarily. And one is, of course, the backdrop of what we might frame as Arab awakening. So, I mean, I will not go into detail, but of course, all these political and social upheavals in the region, protests, and especially very strongly mediatized images that we have of the bodies in these kind of situations. So, this led partly also to ambitions or to gestures of labeling the artists that come from these countries in this sense, you know, to label them in the sense of these political movements and in terms of festivals or framings or having invitations that would take upon that. And I don't say, this is another discussion, if that's good or bad or what is the challenge for curating. I just think we should be aware of that this is really some strong dynamic playing. The other one is, of course, the so much sought after return of religion, meaning to re-dancing body on the backdrop, in this case, of Islam. And very often this discussion is reduced to an idea of it which would mainly go through ideas of restriction and control of the body. I just recall you all the discussion on the real body, of circumcision, the interdiction of images. And what happens then very easily is that you affirm a body which would be a tabooed one, an oppressed one, a body based on a quite binary construction of purity and impurity. So basically what happens that in this kind of watching dance, perceiving it and talking about it, there is something like a static image of the body produced, which is not at all valuing the richness and also the poetics of these bodies. And of course, but that's just a side note, and then we go back to concrete examples. Islamic cultures accord a very important place to the body, as you know, and this is not only as it is the lieu of addressing, of veneration, the vehicle of prayer, but there is many more practices like physical practices in society of meditating, of mourning, of ecstatic moments which are linked to physical, like performative action. So what I mainly want to say that the body that we are talking about, or the bodies of course in plural, not only are representing things that happen there, society or cultural things, So as identity is not an essential concept, but always a very complex coding of experiences and descriptions. And if we talk about the surfaces of religion and politics, of course, this is not important for all artists. You know, like reading them through, I mean, there's many artists who do not directly relate to that in their work. And of course, you cannot reduce at the same time artistic work to this kind of function of just illustrating what happens. So at the same time, they face these narratives, they face stereotypes, they face collective memory and short circuits, which kind of are linked to them in indirect ways, but also in very direct ways. If you look, for example, at the protests that happened in, amongst others, Tunis in 2012, which attacked artists, intellectuals, and also dancers, choreographers amongst them for not respecting Muslim law. Islamic law, sorry. So what shows actually is that we talk about a very broad field without any fixed territory and without fixed boundaries. And I want to give you a quote by a Moroccan choreographer who is Tufiki Sediou, and he said, if you touch on a body, you basically touch on everything. And I think when you already look at where these dances and bodies take place, that becomes very concrete.
I will add to what Sandra is saying that when looking to, I mean, my position is looking, observing, being with this choreographer and presenting them in Europe and also observing what the presentation means there. And the meanings of dance is also a very interesting issue, because I remember Toufer is one of the founder of a festival in Marrakesh, and I remember also Bouchra Wisgan, one of the main choreographer of the region, saying that when the word dance exists, it was already that we win a battle. Of course, dance, she means contemporary dance, because dance is part of our life, our daily life, celebration, and our gathering. It can be religious, non-religious, it can be family celebrations. So, and she was saying that when young people came to the theater hall looking to dance, and they can talk about dance, and they can have a position and critique about dance over there, it was winning a battle. And that is important because artist choreographer from the region for now more than 10 years, so before revolutions and before the changes that we know this last year, they are kind of artists of the city or from the city, artistes de la cité. So taking part not only in their creation process and presenting a project or proposal for a public, but it's building a space of discussion about dance, building a space of like sharing meanings of dance, opening it, because of course dance is part of daily life. And I remember a word from Francis Alice, an artist who did a different project that, let's say, tackled the relation between politics and art. And he was saying something, sometimes doing something poetic can become political, and sometimes doing something political can become poetic. And it's very simple and it's very clear, in fact, of how a dance there is becoming poetic and political. And although many places from here, from Europe, are relating them only to Arab awakening and revolution, they are part, in fact, of kind of awareness of being part of a state of changes, a state of what we want. We don't want this, but what we don't want then. So they are questioning this issue of what do we want, and what can be a sharing space for different groups. And when looking to the bodies in street and in square, we are far from the cliché of we are oppressed, we cannot, because we, like this discussion about veiled or not veiled, and it's, you can see in different cities and on urban context especially I'm talking, that bodies are quite expressive. There are many dialogues, there are many codes to move. Bodies are very rich on the public space. Sometimes also, like limits, create also other spaces to express. There are kind of way of expressing and being in contact and in exchange with others in the city. And all this create kind of a material and terreau, a context that you can see is coming on the stage. That the stage is getting all this material, getting these chords. You see in different work from young generation, from young dancers, taking from the street, taking from the urban landscape, taking from the question in the city, and bringing them on the stage. In the attitude, in the dialogue. And then what is interesting, as Bushra said, I'm not only documenting, I'm not documenting urban condition, I'm not documenting traditional song that exist in Marrakesh. No, they are going further in, instead of representing and documenting, is giving a kind of poetry, giving another value and proceeding to an elevation, offering us an elevation. And that's bring a kind of power of art and power of creation that make us questioning, but at the same time getting up.
Can you have an example maybe of these bodies in the street, or like how this material that is existing in the culture comes back to?
Example like Toufiq Iziedu, a choreographer from Marrakesh, in his last project called Rêve Illusion, dream, it's a kind of playing with two words, dream and illusion. Of course, illusion about what we want to change and if we change it really or not after the fall of big system, dictator, and so on. And dream, it's linking dream and illusion. And so within the work of Toufiq, you can really the first tableau, three dancers from Marrakesh, Toufiq with them on the stage, are in a kind of colère, like something turning, like in Dervish dance, but in a very colère, comment tu dis? With rage, with rage, with the kind of screaming that you can feel when there is a gathering about when there were protests and when there were sittings, and when so there is a kind of a spiral of turning, moving, and getting the hands up, and repetition is very important in the vocabulary of this region, and also in the Sufi dance, repetition, and this violent rage and that you can recognize and link with what is there and the material that come. So they slowly put it there, and they at the end of the spiral, at a certain moment, there is a kind of everyone is taking kind of personality of dictator. You can recognize some. It's just very subtle. You can recognize sometime. You can see in this word, I can hear Gaddafi, or I can hear, but it's just subtle way of getting this repetitive dance, getting in this, and then slowly going to kind of gold stayed a time suspended with them, with their bodies, and how they try to be together and very individual and collective. So this another state coming within the process, and this kind of material, you can see it in, there is also work like Bouchawi's Gan. There are many works. In fact, they all have their kind of language and universe work, but you can recognize some line in it without a big affirmation about it, but they can recognize that they are part, and they are part of what is moving there, and their movement is part of the illusion and dreams of what is happening.
But there is something interesting in it, exactly what Nejma is describing with these examples of this bringing material in these very rich and hybrid cultures, like in this case from Morocco, but this is this you can find in very different examples from other countries, like back into the movement language. Because if you look at the history of contemporary dance, it's still very much linked to a, well, North African and Western history. So I remember an artist in a discussion saying, but the contemporaneity of contemporary dance does not, or let's say at least not entirely, belong to us. Because of course it's a language, a form of expression, a gaze, a way of speaking about dance, which has just, I don't say only, but to a great degree, another history, which is not the history of these countries. So there is a constant negotiation in between this heritage, let's say, or this historical line of development, and the contemporary creation by the artists themselves. So it's nearly a bit sometimes conceived, I would say, kind of like act of violence, you know, to put this contemporaneity on them, and much more what you can see like in the works emerging now during the last years, especially, is first a kind of need of the artists to implement their own materials and to implement their own contents, and which are already existing in a terrain, and at the same time a need to connect and to, well, reflect on their own history. So kind of urgency, yeah. I would say, something that is very present.
It's what I want to add, before going to the urgency, is I want to add that when looking to some dancer from Tunisia also, and late work from some from Cairo, I have seen some. So its first impression is that I could see, like in, there is a project called Dream City in Tunis with Selma and Sofiane Awisi. And it's a project that the artist wants to get back to the city and to contaminate the space with different performance happening. So within the city, so on public square, in a public museum, like I say public, not private galleries, but so there is a kind of move this last years of being on the street. So they take from the street and they go back also to the street. And I have seen it with Dream City in Tunisia. There is also, in Marrakesh, we have different projects that confront directly the work, the dancer, the body with the public there without an appointment. I mean, it's not, you cannot know that they will be a performance, please guys, there is a performance at 2 o'clock, come please. No, it doesn't work like this. It's just you sit there, you put if you have music, or if you have, things, you are just there with your bodies, and you go and you don't know how it will end. And this kind of interesting immediacy, interesting risk within the performance is also very interesting, because the spaces that are tackling are often very relevant space or tension, des espaces de tension. So they go on roof of buildings that are in fact that the governor wants to give to the private promoter, and then they go there to just show that we need something else. And so there is work from a visual artist called Hassan Darsi. So they are back. They do performance without also appointment in market space. So there is this move going on that I think is really kind of a need of getting in contact and also to be part of, to be with, and not to stay in a kind of black box and a bit far. So this...
It's a kind of reformulation of this promise of contemporaneity, actually, that something is there to share, you know, to be in one time and to belong to something or to a group or to some movement. And I think they very much work on, yeah.
It's just like they want to share a kind of, the dancer bodies are just a bit like stimulating the others for freedom. It's just sometimes like agitateurs de conscience. They are shaking the awareness also. So they get inspiration, but they are also part of it and shaking awareness and questioning position of individuals vis-à-vis of the community and vice versa. Mm-hmm. That's what I just want to add about it, because it's a really important project going on, and I think they will. It's also very important to see it in their creation process, mm-hmm. after, when they are coming on stage and in boxes, because they are charged already with all this.
But this is interesting to understand this urgency, let's say, or this emerging of this dance out of a much broader. I mean, this is probably true for much of contemporary dance creation, but it's very specific feature if you look at the cultures in the region. And for example, you have a lot of dealing with this historical backdrop, like working with fiction, with documents, with reformulating documents in some of the countries. But I'm thinking, of course, about Laila Soliman, for instance, who is an artist from Egypt. I mean,
yeah,
and she did a series of work called "No Time for Art."
Very provocative title.
Yes.
No time for art.
And no question mark. I mean, but it's...
In fact, Laila Suleiman is from Cairo, and she decided working on interviews with persons that were accused, or they were in prison, tortured, and so on. And with the interviews, she take this document and work on it as without changing anything in the material, but only working in a kind of tissage.
And like knitting kind of way.
And this is, the provocative title of Laila is that No Time for Art is really questioning artists within this time of big changes, time of course, a dictator is not anymore there, but the system is there. It's not resolved only in cutting the head. Of course, years of abuse, and it will take time to change mentalities, to change a system of dealing with the citizen from a military of a police system. And Laila is really an example of that urgency. I mean, when documenting and taking all this interview is a matter of time, because in 1 year or in 6 months, it's already another situation, and those people are already they disappear, or they're not there anymore, or they are kind of priority. There is something coming that is more and more challenging, and we have to tackle it. So Laila is dealing with this urgency in her creation, and it's kind of it's one element of her dramaturgy, because it's not only taking interviews, it's questioning with this time, with this notion of time, with the urgency, how to create and for whom. And this dimension is very important in some projects we can see in Egypt and Tunisia, and also in Morocco in another way.
In Lebanon.
And in Lebanon, but Lebanon is is quite with there are some in Lebanon, in Beirut, with the civil war, which was and still so heavy, and it was also so productive in a way. It's this civil war, 15 years. So it makes it quite different, and also the position of Lebanon within the region. They are.
Yeah, it was just to say that it emerges in very different countries in different ways, but that you can. That I think that what I find interesting is really saying that this idea of urgency, it goes to point to be a dramaturgical kind of, well, level of working. And of course then the question is also how you relate to the public, I think. You know, how the relationship is perceived by the artists, by the choreographers to the public, and not only, of course, not only when placing the works in urban or outside space, but like in Leila's, in the case of this example, really like in a way of addressing, which I would say is quite radical in her work. I mean, you cannot escape, kind of. And these ways of challenging, which then translate into artistic means and tools, are quite interesting. I mean, we did not so much, as, let's say, the fact that many, or a question maybe, the fact that so many of these works take place in urban space is of course also because working conditions still are, again, you cannot simplify for the whole region, but are still quite challenging.
Yeah, that's true. it's in fact there are many. It's always many layers that make you move from the black box. It's because the city and the street are so important, and when you are part of the city and you want to be part of the city, it's important to be there. But it's also because the means and the space work for choreographer and for artists of the region, it's not so easy to have space to be able to work on a kind of permanent
structures. I mean, infrastructures, and also, of course, like, well, finances and distribution. The way we think about it, I mean, or we know it from Europe. This is.
But it's bring also a challenge, because I don't claim that they should not have space and they should stay like this to be more productive. But it's true that I have seen so interesting project because of the difficulties and the limits. But we need, of course, structure, and especially for to assure kind of continuity and of a space of transmission, which is really lacking.
And education
space
also.
Of transmission.
Education also.
That's what I mean. Transmission for the next, and to be also not to circulate, to let circulation of practices and work within the region. That is also lacking a lot. Very often we meet outside in Europe, and we have really few occasions to let artists from the region show their work within the region. I mean, from Maghreb to Middle East, and in Africa. For me, North Africa is Africa, so it's a really rare occasion to do so, and to be able to discuss works, not only presenting them, but to discuss. The kind of lack which is not neutral. It's quite, it has its objective. If it doesn't exist, it's because of many reasons, political and I mean, consequence of a different system.
Yeah, I guess we will show you an example in a couple of minutes, just to maybe as a kind of, because it is written in the title that we kind of talk about an act of empowerment, and maybe just to have a short note on what that might mean. I guess what we try to say that these bodies of dance in all these countries are of course not only representing what happens, and at the same time they still are partly subject of, on one hand side, a kind of hegemonial discourse of the body in modernity, and on the other side, well, of body conceptions which are rooted in traditions. So speaking about this idea of, and again, it's more an image, you know, like of an act of empowerment, is maybe thinking about dance as engaging in a practice of hesitation. What I mean is that, like, Peter Hertz, the philosopher, he once said, it's like the body, as if the body would be a kind of desiring machine, which kind of, in the very moment of moving, you know, in setting in motion, in really like getting dancing, it would put all these stereotypes and all these fixed concepts and these preconditioned languages for a moment at least into place, and connect us to a body that we are not yet, to this idea that a body could possibly always be different as well. And in this kind of, you know, to a kind of non-realized combination of bodies, and maybe shift the question of what am I, what is this body, to how is this body, and exactly also respond somehow to this idea of emergence and urgency that is some motor of development. So then, I mean, one part of our discussion when we, that we had also in Marrakesh lately with artists, of course, and with very direct feedback of them, is the question that I think if you deal with some bodies and choreographies, you address a space of shared responsibility. And you ask how multiple voices can be organized together in urban space, in private space, in different respects, without just creating another narrative and saying we. I guess that's exactly the point, not to go into these closed unities again. So our interest is not, and I hope that during the Congress we have time to discuss also, it's not about restaging another politicized or another charged debate, but exactly because these bodies are incomplete and unfinished, they are vulnerable, they are kind of, well, in motion, they are not a safe place of insight or of addressing. Exactly, this is also not, as Nejma said, it's not only a restriction, it's not only thinking about contemporary dance in Arab regions as a kind of lack of something, but it's exactly at the same time a kind of power. Because, and I think it's very important for us in Europe also to face this, because what happens there is very important for us, because it raises some kind of very urgent questions and relevant questions on how we would measure our positions to the other, how we would reinvent modes of intervention and participation. And of course, as Nejma said, it's not about to say there is no need for infrastructural and political and financial support. Of course there is. But at the same time, there is other tools that we can bring in. And these tools are maybe, well, more kind of some, trust or confidence and working together. You speak sometimes about alliés.
Yeah.
About being allied, I mean, about working together.
If I can just add about this, because for me, when I'm talking about allié, so allié de sens, so that's, it brings kind of freedom to create its own format and its own way of transmitting or educational or structure or organization, is to, if we have a kind of network of alliés from Europe, from any part of the world, with North Africa, with the Middle East, we have a kind of, we share like some meaning, some notion, but it doesn't mean that we need to take preconceived format, or we are going to recreate school like we did. I think there are some formats, some experiences, some practices that are really giving or adding value. We know here what is, we have a kind of perception. We know we are overloaded with dance proposals. We are in Brussels we can see whole year many performances and dance performances, but this is adding other vocabulary, other languages that can contribute to meanings that exist, meanings with S.
So maybe just the last sentence. This is exactly, you know, these things of allier de sens, I mean, or of being together, that's possibly like more like politics of very small steps, and it's probably slower. I mean, you know, it's not about setting another school or a theater, but it's much more a slower process, but at the same time, maybe in this slowness, there is some kind of potential for criticality and for really like working on dance and sharing some kind of resistance. And we just wanted to finish, we wanted to show a brief clip.
Yeah. So I hope it will work.
Ah, no. You can introduce. She can say what the film is already.
I can.
I don't know if we will manage to solve it.
Otherwise.
We have to maybe
This is not.
Okay. So what we want to show is that, in fact, it's on a public space in Marrakesh. It was a gathering of dancer and choreographer and artist, and they have the only basic principle within them is to walk 100 meters in 1 hour on the square, and at the other side you have a traditional musician from the region. They had also the only lines, the principle they had is to go slowly, we call it daqqa, to go slowly with the music that's the only thing, in 1 hour. So it's crescendo of dancer, and that's all. It's without appointment, and it's on last March.
But it's
Give you a sense of some projects going on. It's called 100 pas presque, 100 steps in 1 hour. Thank you very much.